watching a special edition of Connect World here on CNN with me, Becky Anderson. Welcome back. Returning to our top story, the secret documents that expose the inner workings of Al-Qaeda. I've got here with me in the studio our senior international correspondent, Nick Robertson, who did much of the legwork on the exclusive reporting that we've had tonight. I want to bring in two counter-terrorism experts for reaction to some of Nick's reporting tonight. Charles Allen is a former Undersecretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. He also served 40 years in the CIA, and Michael Clark is Director General of the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies here in London. Charles, let's start off with you. Your reaction to what you heard from Nick's reporting.
I think their documents are genuine. I believe that it shows the change in Al-Qaeda's tactics, not Al-Qaeda core, but also the affiliated networks. I think we're facing smaller, more disciplined attacks. The attacks in Mumbai in 2008, I think, reflect the kind of great psychological damage that was done by that attack. It sort of paralyzed India for several days, shut down the economic and entertainment capital of India. I think that could be replicated in Western Europe.
Michael, many of our viewers will have been, I'm sure, surprised by what Nick was reporting. Were you?
Not really. We knew quite a few of the details, but what's very valuable about these reports is it shows how much people like Rashid Rauf were writing down and how much of it was being documented by Al-Qaeda. For an organization that knew that a lot of their communications were being monitored, that knew that they were being tracked and followed, it's astonishing how bureaucratic they were. And so these reports actually give us a lot of chapter and verse on things that we certainly had a strong belief in. We knew that Rashid Rauf was behind 7/7 and the 21/7, the attacks 2 weeks later, but not quite the extent of it. And this is actually very interesting to see some of the documentary evidence of this, and also the airline plots, the Bajinka plots as they're called, in the following year, 2006. They were the most potentially devastating plots since 9/11, and although they were not close to fruition, their intention was absolutely clear. These guys were going to bring down 6 or 8 aircraft over the Atlantic and do as much destruction as 9/11 had done.
Let's throw this forward, guys. Nick's with me here in the studio. The death of Osama bin Laden, of course, may have damaged Al-Qaeda's core, but loyal offshoots, of course, are still dangerous. It seems the United States is increasingly concerned about Al-Qaeda's expansion in Yemen, particularly the province of Shabwa and Abyan. Recently, the Yemeni government announced a full-scale operation against Al-Qaeda militants in those areas. Just last week, U.S. drones strikes killed the 4th most wanted Al-Qaeda leader in Yemen. Across the Gulf of Aden in Somalia, militants from the Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Shabaab are trying to expand their foothold. And earlier this month, Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for bombing a market in the town of Baidoa, killing several people and injuring dozens. Nick, the future?
Well, I think it's not just the future for Al-Qaeda. It isn't just a strong footprint and being able to take advantage of the remnants of the Arab Spring in Yemen as it was, but also trying to take advantage in other places like Libya, in the east of Libya, where Al-Qaeda is known to have set up camps. That Ayman al-Zawahiri, the head of Al-Qaeda, sent operatives to establish camps where they can rapidly recruit people and train, and that potentially threatens Europe. So it is these offshoots that are working to the sort of core ideals and values of Al-Qaeda, maybe not under the day-by-day direction, but under those core ideas. And the potential also of Al-Qaeda exploiting the situation in Syria is very real.
Charlie, does that resonate with you?
It resonates very well. I think Al-Qaeda was taken aback by the Arab Spring, but I think now it's beginning to catch up. I certainly agree with the point of view that Libya, where there's 100 militias and really a very chaotic situation, is ripe for Al-Qaeda training camps to be established. It's also ripe for Al-Qaeda in Islamic Maghreb to rearm itself with weapons and materials from weapon sites that are scattered all over Libya. So I think we have a real problem. I think we have a real problem potentially longer term in Egypt. So things are going finally more directly towards Al-Qaeda, following some setbacks over the last year with the Al-Qaeda spring.
Which may surprise our viewers. Michael, do you concur?
Yes, in the long run I think that's true, because Al-Qaeda were wrong-footed, as Charles said, by the Arab Spring. But the fact is the Arab Spring is all about alienated Arab youth, and most of the societies in the Middle East find that they've got 30–40% of the population are under the age of 25, under the age of 30. If these people can be found jobs, then they are a force of prosperity. If they can't, then they are a force of instability. And alienated Arab youth is turning somewhere, is going to turn somewhere. And so Al-Qaeda realized, not Al-Qaeda core, but the Al-Qaeda movement more generally, I think, realized that in the next 2 or 3 years, a lot of alienated youth will want to turn somewhere. And they're thinking about, actively thinking about, how they can manipulate that and use it. They won't be able to use it quite in the way that they did in the 1990s and the early 2000s, but they are nothing if not innovative, and the threat will mutate through several more iterations yet, and I think our security services are aware of that. They're trying to keep up with it and anticipate the trends.
And how will the US be anticipating this, Charles?
Well, I think we'll continue our current strategies. Our strategy is not to simply put up defenses everywhere, which we've done extremely well, but continue to lead an attack offensively on Al-Qaeda, including the affiliated networks, working with our allies in a very close attack comprehensively globally. And that's it has to be global. It can't be just in one country or the other. It has to be a very comprehensive attack, and we work very closely with our closest allies in conducting these kinds of continuing offensive operations. Al-Qaeda must be kept on the back foot.
Charles, Michael and Nick, let me just bring your attention to one point that I think is important here, or one sort of constituency, as it were, and that is the so-called lone wolf tactics. Nick mentioned in his report, Mohammed Merah, the self-described Al-Qaeda follower who admitted shooting dead 7 people, including kids, in France last month. He was killed during a police siege of his apartment in Toulouse. Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib, dubbed the Underpants bomber, he was convicted of trying to bring down an airliner bomber with a bomb concealed in his underpants. And Faisal Shahzad, the Pakistani-American who pleaded guilty to attempting to detonate a car bomb in Times Square in May 2010, he was sentenced to life in prison. Nick, lone wolves, how concerned should our viewers tonight and the security services around the world be of these sort of units?
The lone wolf can be very hard to spot, and that's the concern, that they self-radicalize, they do it on the internet, nobody really knows about it. So there's a difficulty in stopping them, but the lone wolf will be relatively limited in what he can do. We know the intelligence services watch for people buying certain chemical products that could possibly make bombs. If the new Al-Qaeda mantra, as we understand it to be, to go for the Mumbai, the gunman type attack, all one needs to watch out for, all one needs to be concerned about, is the possibility that this lone wolf could get a weapon and go shoot somewhere up. It is not going to be the old Al-Qaeda that was so devastating, but that is a concern, and it's a hard one for the security services.
And Charles, the lone wolf, the unit that is one man or one woman, how concerned would security services in your neck of the woods be about that sort of terror, as it were?
Well, we remain very concerned. The Bureau works extremely hard with state and local police officials, law enforcement, to try to identify people who have become radicalized, but it's really going to be very difficult to find these people. We don't know that they're becoming radicalized in many cases. The point is, it's a very tiny minority of Americans, Muslims or converts to Islam, who conduct this. Very tiny. Most American Muslims are mainstream, middle class and upper middle class, and for that we're very pleased.
Yeah, you make a very good point. Michael, the last word is yours.
Yeah, the lone wolf problem is a genuine problem because these people have very low tradecraft. They're not well trained, but Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen urged people to go out and have a go, just have a go. And if enough people try it, then a few of them will get lucky. And that's what the security services, certainly in Britain, are facing more than anything else. People who may be trying something individually, they're not very skillful, they leave trails of forensics, but if enough of them try, some will get through, and the psychological impact is very high. And Al-Qaeda know that they only need a couple of successes to keep the sense of anxiety high, particularly in Britain in 2012, when we've got the Olympics coming up, the Royal Jubilee, all the rest of it.
Michael Clark, Charlie Allen, and with me here in the studio tonight.